So, a little while back, I was coaching a first year teacher who was looking for her first teaching position. She was feeling extremely nervous because the school year had already started and she was worried that she wouldn't get a position that school year. She asked me how to answer questions if she wasn't sure how to answer them or if it was a question she didn't practice. Well, today I'm going to be diving into how to answer tough teacher interview questions without freezing up. So, that being said, let's dive in. So, when it comes to answering interview questions, it's most likely going to happen that there's going to be a question or two that catches you off guard, or maybe you didn't practice that question. In fact, when I coach teachers on preparing for their interview, when they hire me to be their one-on-one coach, I actually don't recommend practicing hundreds and thousands of questions. Instead, I recommend that teachers practice the top 10 most common interview questions. In fact, I even have content from weeks past about the top 10 most commonly asked questions in an interview. So if you haven't checked out that week's content, definitely make sure to check out the link in the description where I will link to that resource for you so you can refer back to it. But anyways, as I was saying, it's very common for you to freeze. And so instead of practicing hundreds and thousands of interview questions and worrying about whether or not you're going to remember how you answered every single one, I recommend that you practice the top 10 and kind of tweak your answer to morph into whatever question they ask you. So, when it comes to answering a question, how can you go about it if you're caught off guard and you need time to think? Well, here is a system I actually came up with that teacher I talked about earlier who was worried about getting her first teaching position even though the school year had already started. And spoiler alert, this teacher did in fact actually get hired by her training district after we worked one-on-one together, and they really loved her and they loved her answers to the interview questions, and she used this exact strategy that I'm about to share with you that I shared with her. So, you may not be familiar with this movie. I might be aging myself here, but have you ever seen the movie Ratatouille? Inside Ratatouille, it is a Pixar Disney film where the mouse or rat goes about becoming a chef in France, I believe. In there, the rat is called Remy, and how I spell it is Remi. Well, whenever I'm answering an interview question, I like to use Remy to answer the question. So each letter stands for something, and it's just something that's very simple to remind yourself as you're answering interview questions to refer back to, and it's easy to remember. So let's go through the different letters and what they stand for and how you can use that to help you answer a question that maybe you didn't prepare for. The first one is restate. So in order to give yourself some think time, make sure you restate the question just like we teach our students to do when they are writing something. You don't just write the answer like the cat is red. You make sure that you restate the question before you answer, before you just give a short answer, essentially, right? Well, the same thing, when you are restating the question, that's giving your mind time to catch up and your words will catch up. So, for example, if you get the question, tell me about yourself. For example, you could start off by restating the question. I would love to tell you about myself. And while I'm saying that out loud, I'm already thinking of the first thing I'm going to say. So restating is a great way to, one, show that you understood the question, and two, it's a great way to give yourself some time to think about the question before you dive into it. So again, R in Remy stands for restate. Now let's dive into E. E in Remy stands for example or explain. Now, something really magical about teaching and just relationships in general, it's very, very easy to forget people unless they tell you stories. We have been learning as a society and as humans in general, we have been passing it down stories for generations. And so it's no wonder that a great way to make sure that you are sticking in the mind of the people that are interviewing you is to tell stories and give examples. So what I actually like to do, and what I actually show the teachers inside my program, Land Your Dream Job, or that hire me for one-on-one coaching through Land Your Dream Job, is to actually create a story bank. So essentially you're listing out different stories and different examples you can lean on later when you have an interview question come up. So for example, you could say, tell me about yourself. Well, I would love to tell you about myself. Something about me is that I wanted to teach since I was 5 years old. Here's where I'm going to explain. For example, when I was growing up, my little brother Dalton was my best friend, and I loved teaching him. I was there when he learned to tie his shoes for the first time. I was there when he learned to write his name in chalk in front of our house. And I always found myself wanting to teach him things I was learning in school at the time. And so my poor little brother, who was somewhat a good sport about it, I would force him to sit down and I would teach him. And what I really liked about this was I love seeing that spark in his eyes, that sparkle, when he learned something new and he was proud of himself for it. And that became addicting to me at such a young age. So that was me explaining or giving you an example, and you can see, you can kind of paint a picture in your mind about what I'm talking about. If I were to just tell you, oh yeah, I've wanted to teach since I was 5 years old, I graduated with my master's, like yes, that's important, but giving specific details, going on and explaining and giving stories is a great way to win an interview committee. As someone who's been on several interview committees, sits down and after they've had like 4 or 5 interviews and they're starting to discuss which ones they remember or which ones they like, it's very easy to remember, hey, I liked this person because I remember her story about XYZ or he, but I remember their story about XYZ. So make sure you explain or give examples about how you're going to answer that question, and it really helps people remember you and it keeps you memorable. So as a recap, we talked about R, restate, E, example or explain. Now let's talk about the M and mini and Remy, which is mission. So when I was applying as a first-year teacher, I didn't want to sound like I was a broken record that was grasping at any position that would hire me. Instead, I really wanted to make sure that I was showing the district that I was very serious about them, what they stood for, and I wanted to show that I was a very good team member, future team member in addition to that district. So I made sure to research every school's mission statement and values. And what I did is I picked a couple of those values that really aligned with me, and I made sure to incorporate it into my answers. So again, R is restate, E is example or explain, and then M is mission. So a great example is when I first applied as a teacher, I applied to 2 school districts. One of the school districts was really passionate about creating lifelong learners. Again, this is back in 2018, so this might be a very redundant or overused term now, and it might not be that relevant, but back then that was very common. And so I made sure that was something I really resonated with because I love learning and I want to instill that passion for lifelong learning in my students as well. So I made sure to incorporate that into my answers when I gave them. So let's say I get that question again, tell us about yourself, and I feel kind of like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to answer. I can walk through Remy. So restate. I would love to tell you about myself. Example. When I was 5 years old, I was obsessed with teaching my little brother Dalton. He was 2 years younger and he was my best friend, and he was a good sport for most of the time, but I would make him sit down and I would teach him things that I was learning in school. I was there when he learned to tie his shoes, when he learned to write his name, and I was obsessed with that sparkle in his eyes when he learned something new. From that moment on, it has been my mission to not only be a lifelong learner myself, because I love to learn new things, whether it's in the profession or out of the profession, but I want to instill that in the students in my classroom as well. I want to show them how amazing learning can be, and it doesn't stop when you're in school. There's a whole world outside of the classroom, and I want to empower my students to love learning the way that I have, or just to love learning in general and to continue their education and continue learning beyond the classroom. So again, I just went from, ooh, I don't know how to answer this, to restate, example, and mission. Now let's wrap this up. So we have R for restate for Remy, and then we have E for example or explain, which is a specific story, and then we have M for mission, which is the values that district holds that you have in comparison. Now, quick disclaimer before I move on. I am not saying to be fake and just pick some random values that you're not actually aligned with, because as you can tell, you can naturally tell when someone's energy is really passionate about something and someone's just saying something because you think it's the right answer. So make sure you're first off actually applying to districts that you've done the research on and you feel like you are aligned with. And then also make sure you allow that passion to come through. I was talking to another one of my clients the other day, and she was worried about going on these like rants and these passionate topics. And I said, no, that's exactly what you want to do. When I was back in 2018 applying for my first teaching position, the job I took, actually both, so I had an interview. I had 2 interviews on the same day. I flew from Oregon to New Mexico. Both jobs offered me the teaching position during the interview. But the one that was most memorable, I was sitting there with the principal and we were just having passionate conversations about what we loved about learning and what we loved about education. And so what was so memorable about that is it really felt like I was just meant to be there, and this was exactly where I was meant to be. And having that energetic, like passionate conversation, I truly believe is one of the reasons I got hired as a 21-year-old first-year teacher. It's because I wasn't holding back and I was sharing my passion, what I was excited for. So now that we talked about restate, example, and mission, make sure you're picking values that are truly aligned with you. Don't just grasp at some randomness because you feel like you can kind of relate to that. Last thing is your it factor. Now, I highly recommend that you figure out what makes you stand out from other teachers. And here's the secret. This is something I dive deeper into inside my program, Land Your Dream Job. Land Your Dream Job is where I help you prepare for your upcoming interview in a single weekend. We go through everything from looking for the right districts to apply for that are going to be a good fit for you from the get-go, so you're not starting off your teacher journey feeling burned out and not supported, all the way to how to follow up and everything in between. So in that program, we talk about your it factor. Your it factor is what makes you stand out, and here's the trick. Your it factor can come from several different things. It can come from, what you feel makes you stand apart. Maybe that's an experience you have, some background you might have that other teachers don't. Or it could be your biggest weakness. And this is exactly what I did for my interviews. I was terrified that districts wouldn't hire me because I was a first-year teacher. I was 21. I was very, very young. I looked like a baby. I had a baby face back then. And so I was concerned that districts wouldn't take me seriously, and instead of going into those interviews feeling shy or nervous about it, I actually used that as a strength. I sat down and I listed out all the great reasons why being a first-year teacher that was so young was a great asset to the district. I was young, meaning I'm looking for a district that I'm going to work for a long time because I don't want to move around a lot. I am passionate about learning, meaning I want feedback. If principals and admin want to come in and observe me, please do. I just got done with student teaching, so I actually really appreciate the feedback and helping me grow. Third thing, I love PD. I love trainings. I love learning new things. And then fourth thing, I'm fresh out of college, which means I might have a little more of an edge on the most recent research-based practices as opposed to maybe my counter peers who have not gone to, college in a couple decades, and maybe they haven't brushed up on their PD quite to the same extent. And so that puts me at a slight edge. So when I was talking about that, I would lean into that. And the more I talked about what made me stand out from other teachers, the more confident I became, because I turned my biggest weakness into my biggest strength. And the more I talked about it, the more confident I became, and the more the district realized how good of a thing that could be. So with your it factor, and we're walking through Remy, so let's say you froze and we talked about R, restate, E, example or explain, M, mission, and then I, it factor. Let's go back to my example of tell me about yourself. And I could say, well, since I knew I wanted to be a teacher from such a young age, I made sure to get a lot of college done in high school. I graduated with 2 credits short from my associates. I went for my master's degree and finished my bachelor's and master's degree in 3 years, so I am just barely 21 right now. But I feel like I am so passionate about learning and being a good teacher that I am always open to feedback, and I am always open to being observed and getting feedback and additional training. And I feel like, since again, I'm so passionate about what I do and what I'm meant to do, and I feel like this is where I'm meant to be, I spend a lot of time outside of the classroom making sure that my practices are up to date and research-based and relevant. And so that's a little bit about me. So you can see how even though you feel stuck and maybe they ask you a question that you're not prepared for, you can use Remy to help you feel confident and show up and answer the question thoroughly in a way that makes people really understand who you are. It helps you be memorable. It helps you feel or tie in to the district's mission and values to show how much of you're going to be a good candidate and a good contribution to the district and the school environment and climate, and then what makes you stand out from other teachers. So that wraps up in regards to everything that you need to know about answering a question that you may not have prepared for on your teacher interview. So we talked about Remy. We talked about how you can use Remy from Ratatouille to help you prepare for answering questions you may not have thought of or practiced during your, leading up to the interview. So we talked about R, which is restate. Restate the question to give yourself something time. E is example or explain. Make sure to add stories or examples into this that'll keep you memorable. That way later when districts are talking to each other about or teachers or the interview committee are talking to each other about which candidate they like the most, you're memorable because you added stories to it and it makes you more relatable. 3, mission. Make sure to look at the district's mission and values. Pick a couple of them that you're going to really focus on and incorporate that throughout your interview. And then 4, it factor. Make sure you show the district what makes you stand out from the other teacher next door. What do you bring that maybe other teachers don't, or not all teachers do, to the table when it comes to working in that environment? So that wraps up everything in regards to how to answer a question, an interview question without freezing. If you want to dive deeper into the teacher interview process, I have a ton of resources for you that I want to share with you that would be some great next steps. The first thing is definitely check out wherever you're tuning in from, because I have a ton of weekly content now, and a lot of them are specifically about teacher interviewing. So make sure to go check out any of my past content on interviewing. I have a ton now, like I said, and they're totally free. I wanted to make sure that when I created this community that I have a lot of free resources for teachers out there, because there weren't a ton back when I started teaching. So make sure to go check that out. The second thing is, if you want me to kind of just compile a big playlist of all my top teacher interview tips, I highly recommend you check out my teacher interview guide. This guide wraps up the top 10 most commonly asked interview questions I get in regards to how to prepare for an interview or how to apply to a district and everything in between. All of the questions I most commonly get asked, I went and I created weekly content for, and then I put them in a guide. So you can go to the guide, read my answer to things like, what should I wear to an interview? How should I create a portfolio? What should my resume and cover letter say? All these things. And then I went ahead and I linked to additional podcasts and YouTube videos. So if you want a more in-depth answer to my to that question, you can click on those and it's all in one spot. So it makes it easier for you instead of sifting through my now 140 different weeks of content looking for that answer. The next thing I highly recommend you check out two different things. If you want me to create your resources for your teacher interview, I'm talking your cover letter, your resume, your follow-up, your resignation letter, asking for letters of recommendation. You want my lesson plan template for creating a demo lesson. I highly recommend you check out my Ultimate Teacher Interview Bundle. This has all of the assets you're gonna need for the teacher interview process in one spot, and they're plug and play, meaning I already came up with the words for you. All you have to do is plug in your info, like your name and the school you're applying to, and I give you a breakdown of what should be in each section. So make sure to check that out. The final resource I have for you, I mentioned this earlier, would be Land Your Dream Job. Land Your Dream Job, like I said, is my mini course. I don't want you to have to spend weeks and months looking for a job. I want to help you get a job that is fully aligned with you, quick and fast, and to spend more time setting up your classroom and getting ready for the new school year, or the middle of the year, if you're in the middle of the year. So I created Land Your Dream Job, where you can walk through the entire interview process with me in a single weekend. I have resources in there. I have a ton of great things in there, including one of my favorite things that I added recently is I have a demo interview in there, meaning I take those top 10 interview questions I talked about and I actually go through and I answer each one using Remy, and then I pause and I ask you the question, and you can pause the audio and you can actually do a practice interview with me wherever you want, whenever you want. So whether it's 2 a.m., across the world, it doesn't matter. I'm literally in your ear and in your pocket, and you can practice a practice interview with me as many times as you want. So definitely make sure to check that resource out. And what I love about Land Your Dream Job too is if you are wanting more one-on-one support, maybe you want to have an actual sit down video interview with me, you can do that. That's one of the options. So make sure to check that out. All right, so that wraps up everything I have interview-wise. Thank you so much for tuning in. What questions do you have about the interview process? I would love to know. Make sure to comment wherever you're tuning in if you see a comment box. If not, make sure to send me a DM on Instagram and TikTok. I would love to chat all things interview. It's something I'm actually really passionate about and I love doing. And oddly, I didn't think I would be good at, but like I said, my first year, I got 2 job offers in one day and I actually found it kind of fun. I like kind of matchmaking teachers with like ideal districts and helping them get hired. And so just a passion of mine. So make sure to do that. As always, remember, we're stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, teacher bestie. Bye.